Now we rule.
So we finally come to the season finale of Alien Earth. And let me know what you thought about this finale and the whole season in general. But I think Now We Rule is such a badass way to end it, or I guess leave everything on a cliffhanger. Now, whether you loved it or even if you hate watched it, those are the words that'll still be ringing in your head for some time. And Sydney Chandler, the actress who plays Wendy, does a pretty good job because he drops them like it's the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment, the whole show turns upside down. And the thing is, it doesn't even sound like a rebellion or even a resistance anymore. If anything, it feels like a coronation. Like this is your new queen. And this was always where things were heading. And one of the interesting part of this finale is the picture we're left with. These aren't the innocent kids we were introduced to at the beginning of the season, fighting for their literal lives and scraps. Now it feels like kids claiming the throne. And now the balance of power has already flipped. The adults who ran Neverland, or I guess I should say used to run it, are all locked up. So we've got the scientists, the trillionaire, the synths, and even the enemy, all behind bars. Now, mind you, these are the people who thought they were in control, and the ones who built the cages, and now they're the ones sitting in them. And the irony is in the contrast because on the outside, you have the kids. And of course, the two xenomorphs. So that's the new alliance, and the Lost Boys aren't anyone's experiments anymore. They're calling the shots, and the corporations have their soldiers, but they have the Xenos backing them up, which means for the first time in the season, the humans aren't just outnumbered. They're, for lack of a better word, irrelevant. Even Boy Kavalier, who spent the whole season acting untouchable, couldn't ignore it. And I think the finale also shows one of the things I like about Boy Kavalier. No matter what situation he's in, if he sees something impressive, he can't help but be impressed, even when he's the one on the receiving end. When he realized what the hybrids were doing, you could see it, the look on his face, he was impressed, even as it was all turning against him. And I think all season long, the story has been about control. So you have adults trying to cage kids, corporations trying to cage nature, and then scientists trying to cage death itself. But the finale shows us the cages don't hold anymore. The hybrids break out and are now doing the caging. The xenomorphs have been essentially domesticated. Even the Eye finds a host in Arthur, a dead human being. But we'll get into that in a separate video. And then, of course, at the center of it all, Wendy doesn't just survive the chaos, she declares ownership of it. So it's not just about Neverland. And I think that's the part people are going to argue about. Because when Wendy says, now we rule, it's not a local victory. I mean, why go through all that trouble for that? I think it's a statement about the entire alien universe. Because think about it, if hybrids and xenomorphs together can topple the most powerful people on the island, then what's to stop them from going any further, from spreading beyond? And obviously, the finale was a very big cliffhanger, which some might appreciate, but others might not like it because it doesn't give us answers. But hopefully, FX renews it so we get all the answers. But then I think one thing that it makes very clear is that the hierarchy has definitely changed and the humans aren't on top anymore. How the hybrids seized control. So let's talk about how the entire balance of power flipped. Because it didn't happen all at once. It was a chain of moments, with each one cutting another leg out from under Prodigy, until suddenly the kids and the xenomorphs weren't the prisoners anymore, but the ones holding the keys. And it starts with the hybrids in a cell. After everything that went down in episode 7, they're locked up, or I guess you can say contained, the way Prodigy always wanted. And on the surface, that looks like order. But I think that's the last moment of order in the finale. Because Wendy, instead of being trapped by the system, decides to become the system. I mean, she literally hacked the network. She shuts down the island's infrastructure like it's nothing. Screens go blank and comms collapse. But then, they were also thinking that Weyland-Yutani was hijacking their satellites and the network. But from what we actually saw, it seems Wendy was the one pulling the strings. I mean, maybe both things could be true, but either way, whether Yutani was jamming them or not, it didn't matter. It all worked in Wendy's favor, and it gave her the opening she needed to push her plan through. Also, funny enough, Prodigy spent all season showing off its control over technology, and in the end, that's exactly what turns against them. And I also like the methodology and how she executed her plan. She doesn't even free herself or the kids first. She unlocks Morrow's cell, because she knows she doesn't need to smash open the door for the Lost Boys because the bigger play is putting the adults against each other. So you have a cyborg unleashed on a synth. Just let them wear each other down, you know. Meanwhile, Wendy holds all the cards and picks her moment. And just when it was Cavalier's turn to, I guess, be dealt with, he walks in with his whole "who wants to play with me" act. And you can see his psychosis plain as day. He actually brags that at 6 years old, he built his first synth and used it to murder his abusive father. And I guess building a synth at that age is pretty genius, but then that's the kind of creator they've been chained to. He calls the Lost Boys floor models and display pieces, Like he can line them up in a store window for his immortality empire. And the thing is, he believes it. That's why he doesn't take this whole thing seriously until it finally gets out of hand, because he's convinced he's untouchable. But then, of course, it's the moment the tide breaks, because the Lost Boys don't bow their heads anymore, and they certainly don't obey. Even Curly has changed, which is saying something. So then Nibs punches Cavalier's guard straight in the face, and I find that very funny because she's always attacking something for some reason. Wendy doesn't tell them to kneel. She tells Kavalier to run. That's the entire power dynamic flipped in one line. And then from there, it snowballs, because we eventually have Sylvia, Morrow, Kirsch, Adam, and even Kavalier himself, the adults who thought they were pulling the strings, all end up locked inside the same kind of cell the kids started in. And I also liked the whole sequence where the adults were being captured. I liked how everyone had their part to play. I mean, take Smee and Slightly for instance. They were the ones who turned the tables on Kirsch and Morrow. And for Slightly, I was happy for him because he finally gets his lick back. He's been through so much because of those two. So yeah, it was good to see him finally get a bit of payback. And then there's Wendy. I really liked how she froze Adam in his tracks. It almost feels like magic when you watch it happen. But of course, it's not magic. It's tech. And with tech, there's always an explanation. Adam was on the network, and Wendy could tap into that. So even though it felt supernatural, there's logic behind it. So every authority figure gets shoved behind bars. And on the outside, we have the kids, and the two xenomorphs hanging off the cell like it's their new enforcers, why Kavalier finally lost. So if the hybrids seizing control is the big shift, then Boy Kavalier losing is the crash that makes it real. Because for the whole season, he's been walking around barefoot like the smartest person in the room, and like he believes nothing can ever reach him. And maybe he really is the smartest person in the room, but that's how deep the hubris runs. But here's the thing, it's not just arrogance. The episode makes it clear his impulses are getting worse. Kirsch even calls out his severe ADHD, and you can see it in the way he jumps from one thought to the next, refusing to listen to anyone. Adam tells him it's time to evacuate, and he's like, no, he wants to fight. He keeps replaying footage of Marcy's transformation into Wendy, obsessing over the past instead of saving his present. That feels like self-sabotage, and maybe those impulses will be his doom, but then it also explains a lot of the decisions he's taken. And then comes the confession, which is about the story he can't stop telling. At 6 years old, he built his first synth, and he ordered it to kill his abusive father. That's the origin of everything. He killed his way into power before he even understood what power was. And instead of grappling with that, he turned it into mythology. It's like, look at me. I'm the boy who outsmarted the world. And that has been his whole identity. And that's why Wendy's able to cut through the myth, that he's not Peter Pan, or some eternal boy with endless imagination. He's just a man. A mean, angry little man who decided to hate everybody, just like his father. And I think that's the exact moment his empire collapses. Because once the kids stop believing his story, he has nothing left. He calls them floor models, display cases for his immortality dream. But they're not listening. And I think a huge part of it is because they're advancing, and they're done being experiments. Wendy's new alliance. So let's draw the parallel. If Cavalier's fall is the collapse of the old order, then Wendy's alliance is the start of the new one. And it's not just with the Lost Boys. The real twist is who's hanging on outside that cage at the very end. A full-grown xenomorph, plus the smaller one that once gestated inside Arthur, both pressing close, almost like they're keeping guard. And that's not an accident, because all season long, the Xenos have been the uncontrollable element, and the force everyone feared. But here, they're no longer just monsters lurking in the shadows. They're responding to Wendy. And I think another thing I find really interesting is how Wendy can call the xenomorph now. At first, I thought it only worked when she was close by. Like it was just a proximity thing. But this episode showed she can summon it from a distance. A single sound from her, and it abandons its hunt and comes straight inside the facility. And when Prodigy's soldiers close in, Wendy points them out, and the alien just tears through the threat, like it's just doing her bidding. So yeah, the hybrids look at Wendy as their leader now, but even more surprising, or I guess not that surprising, the xenomorphs seem to recognize her authority too. And that changes everything. Because the whole idea of the alien universe is built on the terror of these creatures. You can't reason with them, and you certainly can't control them. They're the perfect predators. And yet, Wendy has formed something close to a bond, or like a command. Also, think about what that does to the balance of power. The Lost Boys already flipped the cage on the adults. That's one level of rebellion. But with the xenomorphs standing behind the hybrids, it feels bigger than rebellion. It feels more like a succession. It also reframes how we think about Wendy. Earlier, she admits she doesn't know what she is. Not as a child, an adult, or even Marcy or Wendy. She's caught between definitions. But she quickly realized that the aliens don't care about any of that. They don't lie to her. and they don't hedge. To them, she isn't food, and that honesty, in her mind, makes them more trustworthy than the humans who keep trying to manipulate her. So when the camera leaves us with her flanked by hybrids and xenos, it's not just about survival anymore. It feels like a coronation. One she didn't ask for, but stepped into anyway. So where does that leave us? The season doesn't end with closure, it ends with a handoff. The adults are all caged, and the people who thought they were running the island are now powerless and watching from behind bars. On the outside, you've got Wendy, the Lost Boys, and not one but two xenomorphs standing with her. That's the new balance of power. And that's already a massive shift for this universe. The Alien franchise has always been about humans trying to survive monsters. But here, the hybrids are changing that. They're not hiding or running. They're the ones giving orders now. Which is why when Wendy says, "Now we rule," it's not a threat, it's just a fact. But the finale doesn't just crown a new ruler. It tees up the next chapter. The Eye has reanimated Arthur's corpse. That means it's not done yet. We've seen how smart and calculating it is, and now it's in a dead host body. So that's a whole storyline waiting to explode in season 2. Then you've got Wendy's connection to the xenomorphs. The older one and the child that came out of Arthur, they both seem to recognize her as something like a queen. And the hybrids are already treating her like their leader, so she's not just part of the group. She's the center of it. At the same time, the cracks are obvious. The Lost Boys aren't stable. They're kids in synthetic shells, still figuring out who they are. Slightly and Smee got a bit of revenge against Kirsch and Morrow, but that doesn't erase everything that's been done to them. Joe is still caught between worlds. Human, but tied to Wendy, and carrying a bond with the Xeno that gestated inside him. And then there's Weyland-Yutani. The very last images show their planes arriving, which means season 2 isn't going to just be kids versus adults anymore. It's going to be kids, hybrids, and Xenos versus the largest corporation in the universe. So hopefully, FX renews for season 2, then we get answers for all these questions.